Imagine you are driving alone on a deserted highway in the middle of the desert. 2 in the morning. No people, no lights, nothing but you and the emptiness stretching in every direction. And then, out of nowhere, you catch something in your side mirror. Something running behind your vehicle on all fours, faster than your truck moving at 80 miles per hour. You press the gas pedal all the way to the floor, but it keeps getting closer, 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 until it is right beside your window. You turn to look at it, and it is looking back at you, smiling. And when it opens its mouth, it speaks your wife's name. Do not, and I repeat, do not open that window, because whatever is standing out there is not human, and it never was. Welcome to a new episode, an episode unlike anything you have heard before. Today I will not be telling you ghost stories invented by a writer sitting behind a screen. No, today I am bringing you 4 real testimonies, told by ordinary people, men and women and families, who experienced moments that cannot be explained by any human logic. People who have not slept a full night in years after what they witnessed. Some of them left their homes and never returned. What connects these 4 stories? One thing. Creatures that the indigenous tribes of America warn against even whispering about after sundown. Creatures that are said to have once been human, until they committed the most unspeakable act imaginable and transformed into entities that no longer belong to this world. Entities capable of taking any human form, stealing the voice of anyone you know, and using it to make you open the door with your own hands to whatever fate awaits you. In the first story, a lone driver on a desert road discovers that something is running alongside his truck at over 80 miles an hour. In the second story, a professional ranch guard faces a hybrid creature that bullets cannot kill. In the third story, a mother hears her sleeping daughter's voice calling from behind the back door in the middle of the night. And in the fourth story, a story I never intended to tell, you will learn what happened to an entire campsite. Let us begin with the first nightmare. In late October of 2014, in the state of Arizona, there was a man who worked as a power line maintenance technician in remote areas. His job forced him to drive for hours across deserted roads that only distant villagers and lost truckers ever traveled. He was a practical man who did not believe in superstitions. He was born and raised in Phoenix and had never heard of indigenous legends except as old tales that elders told around campfires to scare children. On that particular evening, he finished work late at an electrical substation located 75 miles from the nearest town. It was past 11 at night. The sky had no moon. All he could see ahead of him was the black ribbon of road being swallowed by the desert on every side, and the headlights of his truck cutting through the thick blackness like a knife through dark cloth. The radio was playing a country music station, and he was humming along, thinking about the dinner his wife would have ready when he got home. Everything was normal. Everything was calm, until that moment. About 200 yards ahead, on the right side of the road, he saw something standing motionless. At first he thought it was an animal, maybe a coyote or a deer that had wandered onto the road. But as the truck got closer, the image became clearer, and his heart began to beat in a way it had never beaten before. It was not an animal. It was a human shape, but it was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. It was impossibly tall, maybe 7 feet or more, and its arms were disproportionately long, hanging down nearly to its knees. It stood slightly hunched forward, as if it were staring at the ground, or as if its spine could not fully straighten, and its skin was a strange grayish-pale color, like flesh that had not seen sunlight in years. He slowed the truck instinctively. He did not know why. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was that part of the human brain that forces you to look at a car accident, even though you know you do not want to see what is inside the wreckage. And when the truck was only about 50 yards away, the creature raised its head. He later swore, when he told this story to his coworkers, that what he saw in that moment was burned into his memory with fire, and that he still wakes up at night seeing that face. The face was human in its general shape, but distorted in a way that is difficult to describe with words. The mouth was wider than it should have been, stretching nearly from ear to ear, and the eyes were the worst part. They glowed with a faint yellow light, not a reflection of the truck's headlights, but a self-generated glow emanating from within the pupils, as though two small flames were burning slowly behind those eyes, and those eyes were staring directly at him through the windshield. Then something happened that froze the blood in his veins. The creature smiled, a perfect human smile, the kind of welcoming smile your neighbor gives you when you see each other in the morning. But it was on a face that was not human, and that smile was not a greeting. It was something else entirely, something that looked like the gaze of a hunter watching its prey walk into a trap on its own 2 feet. He did not think. He did not analyze. He did not hesitate. He slammed the gas pedal down with every ounce of strength in his right foot until he felt his knee might punch through the floorboard. The truck shot to 55, then 60, then 70 miles per hour. The road was narrow and dark and full of gentle curves, and driving at that speed was insanity. But he was not thinking about the road. He was thinking about one thing only: getting away. 10 seconds after flooring the gas, he glanced at the rearview mirror, and what he saw made him scream a scream that no one heard but him and the desert. The creature was not standing where he had left it. The creature was running, but not the way humans run. It was sprinting on all fours, like a predator, but at a speed no living creature should be able to reach. Its limbs moved in a frantic rhythm, and the distance between it and the truck was shrinking. He pushed the speed to 75, then 80. The truck was shaking and rattling, and the road was sliding beneath him, and the creature in the rearview mirror kept getting closer, closer, closer. Then it disappeared from the rearview mirror. For 1 second, just 1 second, he felt a wave of overwhelming relief. He thought he had made it. He thought the creature had tired out or lost its way, or had simply been a hallucination conjured by a fatigued mind after a long day of work. Then he heard the voice, a voice that did not come from outside, a voice that came from inside his head, as if someone were whispering at the very center of his skull, in a voice that was deep and wet and cold. His name. Just his name. Not a call. Not a shout. Just a quiet, confident whisper, as if the speaker knew he could hear it, and knew he could not escape. Then came the second word, his wife's name, in his wife's voice, in his wife's tone, in the exact way she pronounced his name when she called him from the kitchen. The same tone, the same warmth, the same slight hesitation. He turned to his left involuntarily. The creature was running right beside the driver's window, right next to him, less than 2 feet from the glass. It was running at 80 miles per hour as if it were on a morning stroll. Its face was nearly pressed against the glass, and that wide, terrifying smile was still plastered across its lips, and its yellow eyes were locked on him with an unwavering steadiness. This nightmare lasted for a duration he could never determine. Maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute, maybe an entire hour. Time lost all meaning in that moment. All he knew was that the creature was running beside him, looking at him, smiling that unforgettable smile. Then he did something he does not know where he found the courage to do. He swerved the truck suddenly to the left, directly toward the creature. He was ready to die in that moment. He was ready for anything rather than continuing to drive alongside that thing. The truck plowed through the space where the creature had been standing and hit nothing. It vanished, evaporated, as if it had never existed, as if the desert had swallowed it, or as if it had dissolved into the black air around him. He did not stop the truck. He did not slow down. He kept driving at full speed for 45 minutes until he saw the first lights of a gas station on the main highway. When he finally stopped in the station parking lot, his hands trembling violently on the steering wheel, he stepped out of the truck and looked at the left side. There were marks, 4 deep grooves carved into the metal, running from the front door all the way to the middle of the truck bed, grooves that no known animal claw could have carved into solid steel. As if someone had taken a giant fork made of diamond and dragged it along the length of the truck while running beside it. He called his wife, told her he was fine and would be a little late. He did not tell her what happened. He did not tell her that the thing had spoken her name. He did not tell her because he knew that there are things that become more real when you say them out loud. And he was afraid that if he told her what happened, he would hear that whisper again, that cold, wet whisper that came from inside his skull and spoke her name in her own voice. The next day, he took the truck to the mechanic. The mechanic looked at the scratches, looked at him, then said quietly, "You drove near reservation land, did you not?" He nodded. The mechanic said, "Do not take that road at night ever again, and if you see something standing on the side of the road, do not slow down, do not look at it, and certainly do not stop, because they consider stopping an invitation." He did not ask who they were, because deep down he already knew. If you are telling yourself right now that what happened to that driver was just a hallucination from an exhausted man who had been driving for hours through the desert, I understand you. The human mind always looks for the logical explanation, because the logical explanation means the world is still safe and that rules govern everything. But what will you say when the witness is not a tired driver, but a man who spent 12 years in the United States military, served in real combat zones, and saw things that would make most people lose their minds? A man who does not know fear, because fear is a luxury soldiers cannot afford on the battlefield. This man was a former soldier, and what he witnessed in the summer of 1998 on a ranch in the state of Utah made him admit for the first time in his life that he felt true terror. He had retired from military service 2 years earlier and settled in a small town in southeastern Utah, a town with no more than 300 residents, surrounded by vast pastures and barren rocky hills, the kind of town where everyone knows everyone and where nothing interesting ever happens, usually. The problems began in early June. The first incident was when one of the ranchers found a dead cow in his field. Normally, a dead cow is not big news in a farming town. Animals die, that is natural. But the way that cow died was not natural by any standard. The cow was lying on its side in the middle of the field. There were no signs of struggle. It had not run. It had not tried to escape. It was lying peacefully, as if it had fallen asleep and never woken up. But when the rancher approached to examine it, he discovered 3 things that made him call the police immediately. First, the cow had been completely drained of blood. Drained. Not that its blood had pooled on the ground. No, the ground beneath it was perfectly clean. Not a single drop of blood anywhere, as if someone had used a medical pump to extract every last drop from its body. Second, its eyes had been removed. Removed with astonishing surgical precision, with an extremely sharp instrument and a perfect circular cut around the eye socket. The veterinarian who later examined the carcass said that this level of precision would require specialized medical tools and sterile working conditions, not an open field in the middle of the night. Third, and most disturbing of all, its tongue had been cut from the root, cut with the same surgical precision, and the tongue was never found anywhere on the ranch. The police came. They examined the site. They found no footprints, no tracks from an unfamiliar vehicle, nothing. They wrote in the report that the cause of death was undetermined, likely a predator attack, and they closed the file. But the file did not stay closed, because the following week, 2 more cows were found in the same condition. Then 3, then 5. Within a single month, the rancher lost 11 cows, all in the same way. Drained of blood, eyes and tongue removed, with no trace of a predator or a human being. And stranger than all of that, The rest of the herd was behaving abnormally. The remaining cows had become nervous and terrified. They refused to leave the barn after sunset. And if they were forced to stay in the pastures at night, they would all crowd together in one corner of the field, pressed against each other with all their heads facing the same direction, the dry valley to the west of the ranch. This is where the former soldier entered the story. The rancher was his neighbor and friend, and when he heard what was happening, he volunteered to guard the ranch at night. He was not doing it out of heroism. He was doing it because he was bored. Civilian life after the military was quieter than he could tolerate, and he needed a dose of adrenaline every now and then. On the first night, nothing happened. He sat in his truck at the entrance to the ranch, his rifle beside him and a military-grade spotlight in his hand, and watched the pastures until dawn. Nothing. On the second night, the same thing. Absolute quiet. On the third night, he decided to change his strategy. Instead of sitting in the truck at the entrance, he drove to the western edge of the ranch, near the dry valley that the cows refused to go near. He parked the truck, turned off the engine and the lights, and sat in the silence, watching and listening. It was just past 1 in the morning when he noticed the first strange thing. The silence. Not the quiet. The silence. There is a fundamental difference between the two. Quiet means faint sounds, crickets, a breeze rustling grass, an owl on the distant horizon. Silence means the absence of every sound, as if someone had pressed the mute button on the entire universe. Even the wind stopped. Even the insects went quiet. Even the cows that had been lowing in the distance fell silent all at once. Through his military training, he knew what this sudden silence in the wild meant. It meant that every living thing in the area had sensed a predator dangerous enough to make everything hide and go silent. He slowly raised the military spotlight and aimed it toward the dry valley. The light cut through the blackness with a bright white beam, illuminating the rocks and dry brush and cracked earth. He swept the area slowly, from right to left. Then he stopped. There was something at the bottom of the valley. Something hunched over a large, dark mass. The thing was moving in a slow, regular rhythm, as if it were eating. He fixed the spotlight on the target and tried to understand what he was seeing. The large, dark mass was a cow, probably from the rancher's herd, and the thing on top of it was a hybrid creature unlike anything he had ever seen in his life. Not in war zones, not in movies, not in his worst nightmares. It had a body that was roughly human in overall size, but covered in thick fur, brownish-gray in color. And on its head, it was wearing something. Half a skull of an animal, a wolf, or perhaps a large dog. The skull was fixed on its head like a mask, covering the upper half of its face, down to the bridge of the nose, and beneath it, its human mouth was visible. A real human mouth, with real human lips, but they were hanging open and slack, smeared with a liquid that looked almost black in the spotlight. That human mouth was moving, chewing, slowly and mechanically, and without expression, as if its owner were eating a routine meal at an ordinary dinner table, not a cow carcass at the bottom of a dry valley at 2 in the morning. He raised his rifle, aimed, and fired. The bullet struck the creature in the center of its chest. He saw it penetrate the body. He saw the shoulder jerk from the impact. It was a perfect shot. In any real military scenario, that bullet would have dropped a grown man to the ground immediately. The creature did not fall. It did not even stagger. It stopped eating slowly, raised its head, then stood to its full height. He watched from inside his truck, spotlight in one hand and rifle in the other, as that creature rose from a crouching position to full standing. It was well over 7 feet tall, maybe 7 feet 2, maybe more. It stood there, in the beam of the spotlight, with black blood oozing from the hole in its chest, and the half-wolf skull atop its head, and its slack, stained human mouth. Then it did something that made this man, a man who never flinched in war zones, feel something he had not felt since childhood. Pure, unfiltered terror. The creature laughed. It was not a human laugh, and it was not the sound of an animal. It was something between the two, a cold, hysterical, hollow laugh that poured from that slack mouth and echoed through the dry valley as if it were coming from every direction at once. A laugh that said, "Your bullet did not hurt me." A laugh that said, "Nothing you possess can harm me." A laugh that said, "I am not what you think I am." He fired a second shot, then a third. Then he emptied the entire magazine. 5 more bullets pierced the creature's body. He saw them enter and saw the body shudder with each hit. But the creature did not fall, did not retreat, did not stop laughing. Then, with astonishing speed, the creature dropped onto all fours and shot into the blackness. It disappeared in 2 seconds, as if the night had opened its mouth and swallowed it whole. He sat in his truck, the empty rifle in his hands trembling for the first time in years. And when he looked at the spot where the creature had been standing, he saw something that frightened him more than the creature itself. There was no blood on the ground. The bullets had pierced its body. He saw that with his own eyes. But the ground was clean. The next day, he went to the rancher and told him everything. The rancher did not mock him, did not question him. He just sat in silence for a full minute, then said, "I know what it is. My grandmother was from the indigenous people. She told me about them when I was little, but I did not believe her until my cattle started dying." He asked, "What is it? And how do I kill it?" The rancher looked at him with weary eyes and said, "You cannot kill it with ordinary bullets. My grandmother said the only way is bullets dipped in sacred white ash from cedar wood. She said they were humans like us once, but they chose a path with no return. They chose the most terrible thing a person can choose in exchange for powers that no one should possess. And now they are trapped between 2 worlds, neither alive nor dead, neither human nor animal. And they are hungry, always." He never went back to guard the ranch after that night, not because he was afraid, but because he understood, for the first time in his life, that there are things in this world to which the rules of warfare he had learned do not apply. Things that cannot be defeated with firepower. Things that do not belong to the battlefield he knew. Things that belong to a battlefield far older, far deeper, and far more terrible. The previous 2 stories took place in open spaces, in distant deserts and ranches. And perhaps you are telling yourself, "I am safe as long as I am inside my home. The walls protect me. The locked doors separate me from anything outside." But this 3rd story is going to take that feeling of safety away from you. It will take it and tear it apart in front of your eyes. Because what happened to one family in the state of New Mexico happened while they were inside their home, behind locked doors and sealed windows. And it was enough to make them leave that house forever and never come back. The family was made up of 4 people: the mother, the father, their 8-year-old daughter, and their 4-year-old son. They had moved about a year earlier to a small rural house on the outskirts of a remote town in the northwestern part of New Mexico. A beautiful house surrounded by pine trees near a vast nature preserve and far from the noise of the city. The perfect home for raising children, or so they thought. The strange things began in the early autumn of 2019. Small things at first, things that could be ignored. The 8-year-old daughter started talking about the tall man who watched the house at night. She said she saw him from her bedroom window sometimes. He stood at the edge of the tree line, motionless, staring at the house. Her father asked her what he looked like. She said, "Very tall, much taller than you, Daddy, and he walks in a strange way. Sometimes he walks on 2 legs, and sometimes on 4. Her father did not take her seriously. Children at that age imagine things, an imaginary friend, a monster in the closet, a shadow on the wall that becomes a dragon. These are normal parts of a child's development. He told her it was probably an animal, a deer or a bear, and that it would not hurt her. But her mother noticed something that her father had missed. She noticed that her daughter did not speak about the tall man with the imagination of a child. She did not seem excited or exaggerating the way children usually do when they make something up. She spoke about him calmly, seriously, and her eyes when she mentioned him were frightened, truly frightened, and children do not invent real fear. 2 weeks after the daughter first mentioned the tall man, other things started happening. The dog, a German shepherd known for his bravery and confidence, began refusing to go outside after sunset. He would stand at the door and freeze. He would let out a long, mournful howl and then retreat to the corner of the room and tremble. He was a trained 5-year-old dog who had never been afraid of anything in his life. Not thunder, not fireworks, not the wild animals that passed near the house. But something in the night was scaring him to the point of paralysis. Then came the night, a Tuesday night in early December. The father had come home from work early because he was feeling exhausted. He had dinner with the family, played with the kids for a while, then told his wife he was going to bed early. That was around 9:30 in the evening. The mother put the children to bed, made sure they were asleep, then went downstairs to watch television and finish some household chores. It was exactly 11:30 when she heard the knocking. 3 slow knocks on the back door of the house. Slow, even, calm. Not the knocks of someone frightened and asking for help, and not the knocks of someone angry wanting to get in. Patient knocks. The knocks of someone who knows the door will be opened for them. Someone who has all the time in the world. She froze. The back door opened onto the backyard and then the forest. No close neighbors. No logical reason for anyone to be knocking on that door at that hour. Then came the voice, her husband's voice, his tone, his rhythm, the way he pronounced her name, the way he swallowed the ends of certain words when he was tired. Everything, every vocal detail was an exact match. If it had been a phone call, she would not have doubted for a single second that it was him. The voice said to open the door, that he had forgotten his keys inside, and that it was cold out there. She almost walked to the door. Her body almost moved automatically. Because the human brain is programmed to respond to the voice of the person you love. When you hear your husband asking for help, you do not think. You do not analyze. You move. That is instinct. That is millions of years of human evolution telling you to go and help your partner. But one thing stopped her. One small detail. She had left her husband in bed less than 2 hours ago. She had gone upstairs after putting the children to sleep and glanced into their bedroom. He was asleep, under the covers, in the bed, upstairs. So who was standing behind the back door calling in his voice? She froze in place. That feeling that washes over you when you realize something is fundamentally wrong. Not a small mistake, a mistake in the fabric of reality itself. Something that should not be happening. Her husband's voice coming from behind the back door while her husband was asleep upstairs. The equation did not work. Something was a lie, and whatever the lying thing was, it was standing a few yards away from her with only a wooden door between them. Her heart began to pound at a terrifying speed. She crept on tiptoe toward the stairs. She climbed the steps one by one, each step creaking faintly, making her stop and hold her breath. She reached the bedroom. She pushed open the door. Her husband was there, asleep, breathing steadily, under the covers. He had not moved from his spot. She felt a wave of nausea and terror slam into her stomach. She went back to the stairs, and as she was going down, the voice behind the door changed. It was no longer her husband's voice. It had become her daughter's voice, her 8-year-old. And the voice was frightened and shaking and mixed with crying, calling for her mother, saying she was scared, that something was in the yard, begging her to open the door, saying she was cold. Real crying, a real voice. Every mother in the world would recognize her own daughter's voice, and she recognized her daughter's voice. It was hers, 100%. The crying, the fear in the tone, the way she said mama when she was truly scared, stretching the last syllable just slightly. Every cell in her body was screaming at her to run and open the door. Her daughter was outside, in the cold, scared, alone. But she did something that requires a kind of strength that only those who have faced a similar moment can understand. She fought every maternal instinct in her body and went upstairs to her daughter's room. She opened the door. Her daughter was in her bed, asleep, breathing quietly, her small arm hugging her stuffed bear. She had not moved. She had not woken up. She was there, safe, inside. She checked her son's room, asleep as well. She went back to her husband, asleep as well. Every member of her family was inside the house, every one of them in their bed. No one was outside. No one was missing. So who was crying behind the door in her daughter's voice? She went back downstairs, barely able to feel her legs from the terror. She stood in the middle of the living room, 5 yards from the back door, and listened. The crying stopped suddenly. Total silence reigned for a few seconds. Then a new sound began. A sound she had never heard before. The sound of nails or claws scratching the wood slowly. Not violent scratching, slow, methodical, patient scratching, as if the thing standing outside the door had stopped trying to deceive, had stopped trying to pretend it was someone she knew. It had revealed its true intention. It wanted to get in, and if she would not open the door, it would try to open it itself. The scratching continued for minutes, perhaps 5 minutes, perhaps 10. She was not counting the time. She was standing in the living room, her hand on her phone, her eyes fixed on the back door. She saw the door vibrate slightly with each scratch. She saw the paint peeling at the bottom from the force of the claws on the other side. Then everything stopped. The scratching stopped. The sound stopped. The normal night sounds returned. Crickets began to chirp again. A breeze moved the curtains, as though something that had been pressing down on the place had lifted itself and moved on. She did not sleep that night. She sat on the couch until dawn, every light in the house turned on, and the large kitchen knife in her hand. In the morning, she woke her husband and took him to the back door. They opened it and looked at the outside. The lower part of the wooden door had been gouged, 4 deep grooves carved into the solid wood, running from bottom to top for about a foot in length, as if something with 4 long, sharp claws had tried to dig its way under the door. And the wood around the grooves was cracked and splintered from the pressure. On the ground in front of the door there were tracks, but they were not human tracks, and they were not the tracks of any known animal. They were something in between, long toes and protruding nails digging into the dirt. And the husband noticed something that frightened him more than everything else. The tracks came from the direction of the forest on 2 legs, but they returned toward the forest on 4. They called the police. The police came. They looked. They took notes. They said it was probably a bear, or maybe a drunk person playing around, or maybe something else. The family did not care what the police said. That evening, they packed their bags and moved to a hotel in the city. They stayed there for 2 weeks. Then they sold the house at a loss. They moved to a different state, and they never came back. The mother was later asked in an interview about that night. She said one thing that still echoes in my mind. She said, "The worst part was not the scratching, and it was not the voices. The worst part was that the thing knew my name. It knew my husband's voice. It knew my daughter's voice. It knew how she cries when she is scared. It knew details that only someone who had been watching us for a very long time could know. And that means it had been there before that night, for weeks, maybe months, watching, learning, memorizing our voices, waiting for the right night. And that is the most terrifying part of all. Not that it tried to get in, but that it had been watching us all that time, and we never knew." The final story in today's episode is the one I never intended to tell. Not just because it is the most terrifying, though it absolutely is, but because what happened in it did not happen to a single person. It happened to an entire group. 6 mentally and psychologically healthy adults who witnessed the same events at the same time. 6 matching testimonies. 6 people who did not know each other particularly well. 6 people who had no reason to lie or exaggerate, and all of them agree on one thing. What happened that night in the forests of northern Montana did not belong to this world. The incident occurred in August of 2021. A group of 6 friends decided to go camping in a remote area of the national forest in northern Montana, near the Canadian border. The area was far from any official hiking trail, had no cell phone signal, and the nearest paved road was a 3-hour hike away through rugged mountain terrain. The group was made up of 3 men and 3 women: a professional photojournalist, a civil engineer, a high school teacher, a nurse, an accountant, and a veterinarian. Their ages ranged from 28 to 36. All of them were experienced campers. All of them had spent nights in the wilderness before. All of them knew the difference between the sound of a bear and the sound of a wolf and the sound of a deer. All of them knew how to handle themselves in the forest. They reached the campsite late in the afternoon, a beautiful spot on the bank of a clear stream, surrounded by towering pine trees. They set up 3 tents in a semicircle around a fire pit. They cooked dinner, they drank coffee, they traded stories and jokes. Everything was perfect. Everything was normal, until the blackness fell. The first thing the teacher noticed was the smell. About an hour after sunset, while the group was sitting around the fire, a breeze drifted in from the forest, carrying a strange odor. Not the smell of a dead animal, not the smell of decay. It was a smell closest to burned copper mixed with wet rot, a smell with no equivalent in nature, a smell that made the stomach clench and the nostrils burn. The teacher asked the group if they could smell it. Everyone nodded. The engineer said it was probably an animal carcass nearby. The nurse said it did not resemble any smell of decay she had encountered in the hospital. The veterinarian was the most concerned. She said the smell did not belong to any animal she knew. They ignored it and continued their evening. But half an hour later, something else happened. Sounds. They started faint. Sounds of movement in the trees surrounding the camp, not clear footsteps, just sounds of branches moving, leaves being stepped on, something large moving through the forest around the camp, not far away, about 60 to 100 feet from the fire circle. The photojournalist raised his flashlight and aimed it at the trees. He saw nothing. Tree shadows, branches, blackness, but the sounds of movement did not stop. They shifted. They had been on the right, then they moved to the left, then behind them, then in front of them, as if the thing that was moving was circling the camp in a slow, methodical pattern. Probably a bear, the engineer said with a confidence that convinced no one, because bears do not circle a campsite like that. Bears either approach or retreat. They do not orbit. The teacher, quietly, pulled the hatchet from the gear bag and placed it beside him. He did not say anything, but the group understood. An hour passed, a full hour with the sounds circling the campsite. They came closer sometimes, almost close enough to see the source between the trees, and they moved farther away sometimes, almost fading entirely. But they never stopped. A slow, steady, patient orbit. Then, around 11 at night, everything stopped. The sounds stopped. The smell disappeared. The crickets began to sing again. The forest breathed a sigh of relief, and the group breathed a sigh of relief too. Some of them decided to go to sleep. The photojournalist and the accountant stayed by the fire for a while longer. Then they put it out and went to their tents. 2:30 in the morning. The photojournalist woke to a sound. Not an external sound. A whisper. A clear, audible human whisper coming from right outside his tent, as if someone were standing beside it and speaking to someone else in a low voice. He listened. He tried to make out the words. He could not at first. The whisper was fast and overlapping and in a strange cadence, as if the speaker were learning to talk for the first time and trying to imitate the rhythm of human speech without understanding the meaning of the words. As if it were copying the shape of conversation, not the content. Then he began to recognize some of the words, and when he recognized them, he wished he had never woken up. The whisper was repeating words that the members of the group had said during their evening around the fire, entire sentences, in the voices of their owners. He heard the nurse's voice saying a sentence she had said hours ago about work. He heard the engineer's voice laughing a laugh he had let out at a joke. He heard the veterinarian's voice asking a question she had asked about a type of tree, all of these voices overlapping and repeating rapidly, like a recording being played back in random order. But it was not a recording. There was something alive standing outside his tent, replaying what it had heard, practicing it, trying to perfect it, memorizing their voices. Before he could decide what to do, a scream erupted from the women's tent. A real scream. A scream of terror. The photojournalist burst out of his tent. The teacher and the engineer emerged from theirs. Someone turned on a flashlight, and in the trembling beam of the flashlight, the group stood staring at what was in front of them with wide eyes and open mouths. About 30 feet from the camp, between two massive trees, something was standing, a human shape. Tall, sickeningly thin, as if gray skin had been stretched over a skeleton with no flesh added. Its arms were disproportionately long, hanging down to touch its knees, and its head was tilted to one side at a severe angle, at an angle no human neck should be able to bend to, as if the neck were broken, or as if it did not possess a spine, and its eyes reflected the flashlight beam in a yellow-green color, the way nocturnal animal eyes do, but with an intensity and brightness that no animal eyes possess. It stood there, motionless, staring at the group. 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, without movement, without even visible breathing, as if it were a statue carved from terror itself. Then it opened its mouth, and out came the nurse's voice, her real voice, saying, word for word, a sentence she had said around the fire hours earlier, in her tone, in her rhythm, in everything. That voice came from a mouth that did not belong to any human face. The nurse screamed again, a real, deep scream, and when she screamed, the creature tilted its head slowly to the other side, as if it were fascinated by the sound, as if it were recording it, memorizing it, adding it to its collection. Then it began to move. It did not walk. It did not run. It glided. It moved between the trees with a fluid, unnatural motion, as if its limbs did not bend at the right joints, as if someone were operating a human puppet on invisible strings, but did not quite know how humans move. It came 1 step closer, 2 steps, 3 steps. Nobody runs, the teacher said in a calm, firm voice. Stay together, do not split up, and stay in the light. No one knows where that knowledge came from. Maybe instinct, maybe something he had read once, but he was right. In every account of these creatures, there is one rule that repeats itself. Do not run. Running activates the pursuit instinct. Running makes you prey. Standing firm, in the light, in a group, confuses the creature, because it relies on isolation. It relies on separating you from your group. It relies on making you alone. The engineer reignited the fire. He threw every piece of firewood he could find onto it. The flames climbed higher. The circle of light expanded. And in that moment, the creature stepped back, 1 step, as if the fire hurt it, or as if the light exposed it. The group of 6 stayed pressed together around the fire. They did not sit. They barely spoke except for what was strictly necessary. They stood with their backs to each other, and their faces toward the forest in every direction. And the creature remained there, at the edge of the circle of light. It appeared sometimes between the trees and disappeared sometimes, but it never left. And this continued until the sky began to color with the first threads of dawn. When natural light began to seep between the trees, the creature vanished. It did not leave. It did not run. It vanished, as if the light dissolved it, as if it were a part of the blackness itself, and when the blackness receded, it receded with it. The group did not wait. They broke camp in under 10 minutes. They left things behind. They did not care. They hiked 3 hours at the fastest pace they could manage until they reached the paved road. And when they arrived, the photojournalist looked at his phone. He found that the time was different from what he had thought. They believed they had been hiking for 3 hours, but according to his phone, 6 hours had passed, 3 hours of time unaccounted for, and none of them could remember what had happened during them. When they returned to town, some of them tried to find an explanation. They spoke with an elder of the indigenous tribes in the area. The elder listened to their story in complete silence, and when they finished, he said one sentence: "It has seen you, and now it knows your voices. Do not return to that place, and do not speak of it by its true name after sundown, because when you speak its name, it hears, and when it hears, it knows where you are." None of the 6 ever returned to that forest. 4 of them moved to distant cities. The nurse said in her testimony that she has not been able to hear her own voice in a recording since that night without feeling sick, because she remembers her voice coming out of that mouth. And she wonders every night before she falls asleep whether that thing still has her voice, and whether it is using it right now to make someone else open their door. The indigenous tribes have known about these entities for thousands of years. They warned against them. They established rules. Do not speak their name. Do not look at them directly. Do not run. And do not open the door no matter what voices you hear, even if it is the voice of your mother, or your wife, or your small child crying outside and begging you to let them in. Because what is standing behind that door is not the person you love. So I say to you, if you are driving your car at night on a deserted road, and something appears that should not exist on this planet, do not slow down, do not look in the mirror, and do not stop under any circumstances. And if you are in your home, and you hear the voice of someone you know calling from behind the door at a late hour, make sure first that the person is not sleeping in the next room. And if you are in the wilderness, and you smell something that does not belong to this world, and you hear your own voices echoing back to you from between the trees, then you are not alone, and the thing that is watching you is learning. If you enjoyed this episode and want more real nightmares that they do not want you to know about, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel now and turn on the notification bell, because the next nightmare is closer than you think. We will meet in the next episode, if we are still alive.